If you want to phone your doctor's surgery to book an appointment, do you have to call an 084 premium rate telephone number? Is that what you ring to get through? Do you resent that? The government has announced it's considering banning GP surgeries and other parts of the NHS from using phone numbers which would begin with 084, following complaints from members of the public that the calls are too expensive. In theory, it should only cost you 5 pence a minute to call an 084 number, but in reality, costs are usually higher, especially if you're calling from a mobile, or if you have to wait a long time in a queue. Ministers are launching a consultation on whether to keep the premium rate numbers or not, and in a moment we'll hear from Ben Bradshaw, Health Minister. But first, let's talk to the Radio 2 doctor, Sarah Jarvis, about the system that you've been using in your surgery, Sarah.
We have indeed. In fact, we've done one, and then we've done the other, and now we've gone back again.
So you switched to 084 for what reason?
We switched because we looked into it at the time, and about 2 or 3 years ago when we decided to switch over, there were lots more options that you could get with the 0845 number. It meant that patients didn't need to get an engaged signal. They could be directed straight away to the results line, to the office, to make an appointment, etc. So actually, interestingly, we did it because it meant that people were waiting for much less time.
Why couldn't people get that functionality from a normal local number?
Well, we're on what's called Thamesnet, which is a lot of GP surgeries now are linked into their local hospital, so that I can ring the laboratory, so that I can ring the hospital ward, so that I can talk directly to doctors at the hospital. And at the time, we couldn't get that through our Thamesnet. Is
that because they need a little bit of extra revenue to fit the bit of plastic that redirects the callers?
I don't know. What we discovered, I mean, at the time we didn't think there was any problem with costs, because we were told that it was a local rate number. Now, of course, if you've got a business where people are ringing in from all over the country, it's actually usually cheaper to use an 0845 number. And at the time, it hadn't crossed our minds that so many of our patients were using mobile phones. So as soon as they told us, we went back to our 0208 provider, our original provider, and said, look, can you provide all the benefits that we want our patients to get without them having to use 0845? And they said, well, funny you should mention it. We've just introduced that. And as soon as they had it, and our patients started telling us that's what they wanted,
oh, I see.
We went back.
You went back and you've got the same system but with the proper local number.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you very much for joining us. Lovely to hear from your voice, Sarah. Am I seeing you before Christmas or not?
No, just after 5th of January.
5th of Jan, I'm told. Happy Christmas to you and your family.
And to you. Bye now.
Sarah Jarvis, Radio 2 doctor there. And we spoke to the Health Minister, Ben Bradshaw, about 20 minutes ago about this, and I'll play his interview in just a second. So you can see why the government is considering banning 084 numbers. Radio 2. Health Minister, tell us why you're doing this.
Well, because we've had quite a lot of complaints from members of the public and parliamentarians about the extra charge involved when people have to call their doctor or another NHS service using an 084 number. We banned 087 numbers several years ago, you may recall, but what has happened in some cases is that people have simply switched to 084 numbers, and we don't think it's fair that some people have to pay more than most of the population.
But the defence, presumably, is doctors trying to raise a bit of money to run a better phone system for their patients.
Well, the money doesn't actually go to the doctors. All it really does is cover the cost of providing an enhanced telephone service. It's the company that runs the system that gets any profit from it. But no, there is an argument, and some people have told us this, that they actually quite like the extra service, the added functionality, as it's called, of a system where they don't get an engaged tone, or that the phone doesn't simply ring and ring and ring and no one answer it. But on the other hand, I think a lot of people also feel that they shouldn't have to pay more than the cost of a local call to access what should be a service in the health service free at the point of need.
But if you go to the local calls and you make doctors use just a local number, do you then go back to the engaged tone?
Well, that depends how doctors organise their phone systems and how they staff their receptions and so forth. But there is an alternative, Jeremy, and that's the 03 number, which Ofcom launched about 2 years ago now, which can provide the functionality, the extra service of an 084 number without actually charging the person making the call. The call is picked up by the receiver of the call rather than the initiator.
Ben Bradshaw, Health Minister, MP for Exeter, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And with us now are Edwina Curry, a former Health Minister and member of the Patients Association, and Dr Richard Vaughtry, who's a GP in Leeds and is also Deputy Chair of the British Medical Association's GPs Committee. Welcome to you both.
Hello.
Edwina, reflect on what the Minister was saying, if you can, for us.
Well, I'm glad to hear that they're planning to take some action. They all seem to operate in a fog, don't they? Don't know what's going on. I mean, this is outrageous. Nobody should be paying a premium line cost in order to phone the doctor. And I'll add something else. It really comes from people having to hang on and getting the engaged tone. Nobody should have to hang on when you're desperately trying to get hold of your doctor, especially if the doctor has said, look, anything goes wrong, call me. One of the obvious things is, I mean, why don't they just have more receptionists? Why don't they spend the money instead? I gather it costs some GPs something like £10,000 a year to have this system installed. They just had somebody in for a couple of hours in the morning when they're really busy taking all the calls. Nobody would get an engaged tone. Nobody would get music on the line. They might actually get through and get the appointment.
Dr. Vautry, what about that?
Well, we've seen a dramatic improvement in satisfaction amongst our patients who we survey after the introduction of systems like this.
Tell us about that.
Well, previously we did have concerns that we weren't providing a good enough service, and that's why we changed our system. And following the introduction of the new system, the patients who were asked did generally say that they were more satisfied, they could get through more quickly, they could get their call and their concern dealt with a lot better than under the previous arrangements.
Because the system is allowing them to press 2 to hear about a drugs test and all of that.
Yes, they don't find themselves in a long queue. They're able to get a test result or a prescription sorted out or an appointment booked in a timely way. And that's why patients like this system. I mean, we do have concerns about the costs, which for most people are a few pence, but it's particularly mobile users. And I think I would welcome the government talking with phone companies to try and resolve the funding arrangements, because I think that's the area to focus on.
Well, isn't that the answer, Edwina, for someone just to make it cheaper to call an 084 number from a mobile?
It would be lovely if it was cheaper to call everybody from a mobile for any reason whatsoever. But the thing that Dr. Vautry hasn't explained to me is why didn't you just buy the equipment instead of paying rental and all the rest of it, as you're obviously doing, instead of having an annual contract? Why not just buy the equipment and install it? I gather that Howard Stote, who is not only a GP but is also a member of the House of Commons, has done exactly that. And if he can do it, why can't everybody?
I think, as Dr. Jarvis said earlier on, the issue here is that many practices engaged in these contracts a number of years ago now and are bound into often 7-year contracts. And at the time, there were very little options.
That wasn't smart, was it? That really wasn't smart.
But it was the best option for the patients at the time.
But also, Edwina, don't you... Sorry to interrupt, Doctor, but Edwina, if you've got a burglar alarm at home, you may well be the system that you lease, and that means they come round every year to maintain it. And that, you know, if you just bought the kit off them 2 years later when it breaks, you've got no one to go to.
What I'm also interested in is why on earth they just don't have enough receptionists and have enough people on duty when the calls are coming. They know when the majority of calls are coming.
But that's different, though, from the idea of leasing it. Leasing at least keeps you in a relationship with the people who can fix it.
Yeah, and somebody's making a profit off you.
They are. But you're not against people making profits, are you?
I'm not against people making profits. I am against people actually leeching off disabled people, because they will be mostly the ones who are on the line a lot needing to talk to the doctor, or mothers with small children. I mean, my own little granddaughter's been diagnosed with chickenpox this week, and I know that my daughter was really, very worried about what it was and had to talk to the doctor and so on. You like to feel that you can pick up the phone, dial the doctor's number, and you will get straight through. An answering service or a recording service is fine if you want to leave a message for a repeat prescription and all that sort of thing. Of course it is. I see no reason whatsoever why that has to be done on premium rate phone lines.
Is this like the hospital car parking, where in the end people just are so annoyed they have to pay to park when they're ill?
No, I don't think so at all. I think we're talking about a few pence rather than sort of large charges for hospital parking. And what we would like to see is that small amount of money actually reduced. And I think that's why I would welcome a discussion with phone companies. But we should also recognise that there are large numbers of other public bodies using 084 or 085 numbers, including NHS Direct, which takes thousands and thousands of calls every day. And I think there are many organisations from the police, local authorities and other hospital services who need to be involved in this discussion.
Thank you very much, both of you, for your time. Happy Christmas.